In a quiet Iowa town where neighbors exchange warm hellos and trust flows easily, there lived a man named Jack. He wasn't just a man, he was a pillar of the community, a respected optician who helped people see the world clearly. His practice thrived, his patients adored him, and his colleagues praised his skill. He seemed to have it all: a successful career, a beautiful home, and a loving partner named Michael. From the outside, Jack's life was enviable, picture perfect. But one day, the simplest of events, a routine visit to the vet, set off a chain of discoveries that would unravel everything. A single moment of concern for an injured dog would lead authorities down a trail they could never have expected. The truth they uncovered wasn't just shocking, it was unimaginable. What could possibly connect a devoted doctor, a loyal pet, and a series of tapes that no one was ever meant to see? What kind of life hides behind the locked doors of an otherwise pristine home? This is the true story of Jack, a man whose darkest secrets were exposed, leaving an entire community in disbelief. What you're about to hear is real, and it's far more disturbing than you can imagine. Welcome to True Crime Files, the channel that brings you the most gripping and hard-to-believe real-life stories. Here, we explore cases that challenge everything you think you know about people, the stories that make you question how well we can truly know anyone. Today, we're diving into a case that shocked an entire town and left even seasoned investigators struggling to process what they uncovered. This is not an easy story to hear, but it's one that must be told. If you're captivated by the untold truths hidden behind ordinary lives, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And as you follow this story, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we can shed light on stories like this and help bring awareness to the issues that matter most. Jack was everything you'd expect in a successful doctor. He was charismatic, professional, and trusted by everyone who walked through the doors of his clinic. As an optician, Jack had a way of making his patients feel at ease. He was the kind of doctor who remembered birthdays, asked about your family, and made you believe he genuinely cared. In the small Iowa town where he lived, his reputation was impeccable. Parents brought their children to him for their first pair of glasses, and the elderly sought his advice for managing their vision as they aged. Jack wasn't just a doctor, he was part of the fabric of the community. Outside the clinic, Jack's life appeared just as polished. He owned a well-kept home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs. Jack was also in a loving relationship with Michael, his partner of 3 years. The two were often seen together at local events, hand in hand, laughing and sharing a connection that many admired. They were planning to marry, a celebration that was sure to be the talk of the town. Jack and Michael had a dog too, a lively companion that added warmth and joy to their home. Neighbors often saw Jack walking his dog in the evenings, a routine that painted an even more wholesome picture of his life. By all accounts, Jack had everything: a thriving career, a loving partner, a comfortable home, and the respect of his community. But the thing about perfection is that it's often an illusion. Sometimes what we see is only what we're allowed to see. Jack's world, so carefully curated and outwardly flawless, held a piece of himself that no one could have expected. This wasn't just a hidden side, it was a side that existed far away from the polished image he presented to the world. You see, Jack had a secret, and it wasn't the kind of secret that stays buried forever. Secrets have a way of unraveling, often when you least expect it. For Jack, it all started to come apart the day he took his dog to the vet. The dog had been injured, a minor accident, or so Jack claimed, the kind of thing that happens to pets from time to time. Jack didn't seem particularly concerned, just eager to have the animal checked out and treated. But as the vet began the examination, something didn't sit right. The injuries were unusual, and they raised questions that demanded answers. The vet, a professional with years of experience, knew what they were seeing wasn't normal. This wasn't the kind of injury that came from a simple fall or an encounter with another animal. This was something else entirely, something deeply unsettling. The vet couldn't ignore it, and they didn't. A report was filed, and an investigation was launched. What came next would shatter the quiet life Jack had built. Investigators began looking into Jack's background, his habits, and his private life, it didn't take long for them to uncover evidence that was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Jack, the trusted optician, the caring partner, the friendly neighbor, was hiding something. It was something that couldn't be reconciled with the man everyone thought they knew. The investigation revealed a collection of recordings, a digital archive of acts that defied comprehension. These weren't just random clips or innocent videos. They were deliberate, carefully produced, and deeply troubling. The man who seemed to have it all was not who he appeared to be. His charm, his success, his perfect image, it was all a mask that hid a life no one could have guessed existed. Jack's secret wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a betrayal of the very humanity that had made him so beloved. As the investigation unfolded, more and more questions emerged. How long had this been going on? How had no one noticed? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what drives someone to do what Jack had done? For the people of Jackstown, the truth was almost impossible to process. How could the man they trusted, with their vision, their health, their conversations about family and life, be capable of something so horrific? It wasn't just the shock of his actions. It was the profound dissonance between the Jack they thought they knew and the Jack revealed by the investigation. Michael, Jack's partner, was among those blindsided by the revelations. He had shared his life with Jack, shared dreams of a future together, and now he was faced with a truth that left him questioning everything. The man he loved, the man he planned to marry, was a stranger. Jack's secret had stayed hidden for years, protected by the very image that had made him so untouchable. But now, the mask was off, and there was no going back. What began as a routine vet visit had become the first thread in a web that would unravel Jack's entire life. The truth was out, and there was no hiding from it anymore. Jack had always been known for his love of animals. He would frequently walk through the neighborhood with a dog at his side, greeting passers-by with a smile and a cheerful wave. Over the years, neighbors noticed that Jack seemed to acquire a new dog every few months. Most people assumed the change was due to circumstances like fostering or rehoming dogs. No one questioned it, because why would they? Jack was the kind of man you didn't question. He was friendly, well-spoken, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. One day, Jack brought home another dog, a young, energetic mix with soft fur and bright eyes. The dog quickly became part of his routine, seen trotting alongside him during evening walks. People admired Jack for his dedication to these animals, often praising him for taking the time to care for them. But just a few months later, this new dog was involved in what Jack claimed was a minor accident. He explained to neighbors that the dog had taken a fall while playing in the backyard and had injured itself in the process. It wasn't anything serious, he reassured them. Just an unfortunate mishap. Concerned about the dog's well-being, Jack took it to a local veterinary clinic for an examination. The vet, an experienced professional who had seen countless cases over the years, began the checkup like any other. But as the examination continued, the vet started to notice that something wasn't right. The injuries on the dog didn't match the story Jack had given. They weren't consistent with a simple fall or rough play. These injuries were different, disturbing in their nature and unmistakable in their cause. What the vet saw raised immediate alarm. The dog showed clear signs of severe physical trauma, and there were other indicators, ones that suggested something far worse. The vet was horrified. This wasn't just an injured animal. This was a victim of something unspeakable, something no animal should ever endure. Unable to ignore what they had discovered, the vet made a decision that would set everything in motion. They reported the case to local authorities, detailing their findings and expressing their concerns. When the authorities received the report, they knew they couldn't treat this as an isolated incident. The nature of the injuries suggested intent, and intent suggested a deeper issue. They began an investigation, starting with Jack and his relationship with the dog. At first, Jack cooperated. He answered questions and appeared calm, his demeanor as steady as ever. But as the investigation progressed, cracks began to show. The authorities started looking into Jack's past, his habits, his routines, and his home life. They sought out neighbors, colleagues, and anyone who could provide insight into who Jack really was. Most people spoke highly of him, describing him as kind, professional, and trustworthy. But when asked about the dogs Jack had owned over the years, some began to recall how often those dogs seemed to come and go. It was a pattern that hadn't stood out before, but now seemed unusual under the circumstances. The real breakthrough came when investigators obtained a warrant to search Jack's home. They weren't sure what they were looking for, but they knew they needed to find answers. Inside Jack's house, everything appeared normal at first. Neatly arranged furniture, framed photos, and a sense of order that reflected his polished public image, but as they delved deeper, they found something that would change the course of the investigation. Tucked away in a locked cabinet was a collection of digital storage devices, hard drives, USB sticks, and memory cards. The authorities seized them, unsure of what they contained, but aware that these items could hold critical evidence. When they began reviewing the files, the reality of what they had uncovered became painfully clear. The recordings showed acts that were beyond comprehension. They revealed a side of Jack that no one had ever seen, a part of his life that he had meticulously hidden from the world. These weren't just random clips. They were carefully recorded, organized, and stored. The evidence was undeniable, and it painted a picture that no one could have anticipated. The investigation deepened. Authorities traced some of the recordings to online platforms where Jack had been distributing the content. It became clear that this wasn't a one-time occurrence or an isolated watch-show incident. Jack's actions spanned years, involving multiple dogs and creating a trail of victims that no one had known about. What was perhaps most chilling was how seamlessly Jack had managed to live a double life. By day, he was the trusted optician, the friendly neighbor, the devoted partner. By night, he became someone entirely different, someone capable of acts that defied explanation. As the evidence mounted, so did the questions. How had Jack been able to maintain this facade for so long? How many others had crossed paths with him, never suspecting what lay beneath the surface? And most importantly, how many victims had there been? The search for answers wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about understanding how someone like Jack could exist in plain sight, unnoticed and unchecked, for so many years. The investigation had started with a single injured dog, but it was now uncovering a story that would shock an entire community and leave a lasting impact on everyone involved. The investigation that began with a single report from a veterinarian quickly unraveled into a case that would leave even seasoned authorities shaken. What they uncovered was not only disturbing, but deeply unsettling in its scope and detail. The evidence began to pile up, starting with the contents of the storage devices seized from Jack's home. As investigators sifted through the files, they found video after video, each more shocking than the last. These were not moments captured accidentally or in passing. These were deliberate recordings. The angles, the setup, the clarity of the footage, all pointed to a calculated effort to document the acts. It became clear that Jack was not just participating in something unimaginable, he was archiving it. The recordings revealed everything investigators had feared and more. Jack, the trusted doctor, was shown sexually abusing the dogs he had brought into his home. These acts were not isolated incidents, but part of a pattern, one that stretched back years. Each dog had become a victim, a temporary fixture in his life before being replaced by another. But it didn't stop there. Investigators discovered that these videos were not simply being kept for personal reasons. Jack had been uploading and selling the recordings on hidden corners of the internet. He wasn't just documenting the abuse, he was profiting from it. The content was distributed to others, forming part of an underground network that traded in similar material. This wasn't just a private obsession, it was a criminal enterprise. What shocked investigators even further were the other acts caught on camera. The abuse went beyond what they had initially suspected. There were scenes of cruelty, degradation, and acts that defied any sense of humanity. The videos showed a man who appeared devoid of empathy, someone who had turned living beings into tools for his gratification. The level of planning and intention behind each recording was chilling. Piece by piece, the authorities began to reconstruct the timeline of Jack's activities. They tracked his transactions, uncovering payments linked to the sale of these videos. They found communications that suggested Jack was not only creating this content, but actively engaging with others in this illicit world. It was a network that thrived on secrecy, one that operated far from the eyes of the law, until now. As the case grew, so did the impact on the community. When news of the investigation began to spread, people were stunned. Jack wasn't just a name to them, he was someone they knew, someone they trusted. Parents who had brought their children to his clinic were left reeling. Neighbors who had shared casual conversations with him now struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the man described in the reports. To say the town was stunned is an understatement. Jack, the kind optician who had been a part of so many lives, was revealed to be someone entirely different. The betrayal felt personal. How could someone who seemed so normal, so caring, be capable of something so horrific? It wasn't just the nature of his crimes that shocked people. It was the realization that someone so close to them had been hiding such a dark secret for so long. For Michael, Jack's partner, the discovery was devastating. He had shared his life with Jack, trusted him, loved him. Now, he was faced with the reality that the man he planned to marry had been living a double life. Michael had no idea what Jack was doing behind closed doors, and the truth left him questioning everything. How had he missed the signs? How had Jack managed to keep this hidden for so long? As more details of the case came to light, the community's shock turned into a deep sense of unease. If someone like Jack could do this, what did it say about the ability to truly know the people around us? The case forced people to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, appearances, and the hidden lives of those we think we know. The investigation wasn't just about bringing Jack to justice, it was about uncovering the full extent of what had happened and ensuring it could never happen again. Each new piece of evidence added another layer to the story, painting a picture of a man who had gone to great lengths to conceal his actions. But no matter how carefully he had hidden the truth, it had all come crashing down. Jack's arrest marked the beginning of a legal battle that would expose everything. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was no denying what he had done. For the investigators, the work was far from over. They had to ensure that every detail was accounted for, every victim recognized, and every connection to the broader network investigated. For the community, the fallout was profound. People questioned their judgment, their instincts, and the way they had allowed themselves to trust Jack without question. The scars left by his actions weren't just emotional. They were a reminder of the darkness that can exist behind even the most ordinary of facades. Jack's story wasn't just one of crime, it was one of deception, betrayal, and the fragile line between the life we present and the truths we hide. And for everyone touched by this case, it was a lesson they would never forget. Once the investigation reached its conclusion, authorities moved swiftly. The evidence gathered from Jack's home left no room for doubt. The recordings, the transactions, the communications, each piece fit together to reveal a deeply disturbing pattern of behavior. Armed with this mountain of proof, law enforcement obtained a warrant for Jack's arrest. It was a quiet morning when they arrived at his home. Jack answered the door, his usual calm demeanor still intact, but the officers didn't waste time. He was taken into custody, his hands cuffed as his neighbors watched in disbelief. For a man who had built his life on a foundation of trust and respect, this moment marked the complete collapse of everything he had worked to project. The charges brought against Jack were extensive and severe. He faced multiple counts of animal cruelty, with each charge tied to the specific acts captured in the recordings. Additionally, he was charged with the production and distribution of illegal material, a crime that carried heavy penalties on its own. The authorities also pursued charges related to the broader network he had been a part of, aiming to dismantle the systems that allowed such acts to thrive in secrecy. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Prosecutors laid out their case with precision, presenting the evidence in meticulous detail. The recordings were described, the transactions were traced, and the full extent of Jack's activities was made clear. For the jury, there was no ambiguity. The facts spoke for themselves, and the weight of the evidence was undeniable. Jack's defense team had little to work with. They attempted to paint a picture of a man struggling with personal demons, but their arguments rang hollow in the face of what had been uncovered. The court saw Jack for what he was, a man who had violated not only the law, but also the trust of everyone who had ever placed their faith in him. The legal consequences were severe. Jack was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, ensuring that he would be unable to harm another animal again. In addition to his incarceration, he was ordered to pay fines and restitution to animal welfare organizations. The court also mandated that he undergo psychological evaluation and counseling, though for many, it was hard to imagine any treatment that could explain or justify his actions. But the impact of Jack's case extended far beyond the walls of the courtroom. When news of his arrest broke, it sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. The media picked up the story almost immediately, and it quickly gained national attention. Headlines described the case in stark terms, highlighting the betrayal, the scale of the crimes, and the broader implications for animal welfare. For the people who had known Jack, the news was almost impossible to comprehend. Patients who had once trusted him with their care spoke of their disbelief. Neighbors who had shared friendly conversations with him struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the reality of his actions. Even Michael, his partner, was thrust into the public eye, forced to answer questions about how he could have missed the signs. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Animal rights groups seized on the case as an example of why stronger protections and harsher penalties for animal cruelty were needed. Protests were held, petitions were signed, and calls for change echoed across the country. Jack's case wasn't just a story of one man's crimes, it became a rallying cry for those advocating for the voiceless victims who couldn't speak for themselves. This case sparked national outrage, shedding light on the dark corners of underground animal abuse networks. For many, it was a wake-up call. It revealed not only the extent of the cruelty that could exist, but also the systems that allowed it to flourish in the shadows. The videos Jack had sold were just one part of a much larger, more insidious problem, one that authorities vowed to continue fighting long after Jack was behind bars. The media coverage didn't just focus on Jack's crimes. It also explored the broader implications of his case. Documentaries were made, articles were written, and experts were interviewed, all aiming to understand how someone like Jack could operate undetected for so long. The conversation extended beyond animal abuse, touching on issues of trust, accountability, and the hidden lives people lead. For those closest to the case, the emotional toll was immense. The veterinarians who had first reported the abuse spoke of their anguish at seeing such clear signs of cruelty. The investigators who had worked tirelessly to bring Jack to justice described the difficulty of confronting the evidence day after day. And for the community, the betrayal lingered, a reminder that even those who seem the most trustworthy can have secrets that defy comprehension. But amidst the outrage and the heartbreak, there was also hope. The attention brought to Jack's case led to increased support for animal welfare organizations, stricter regulations on online content, and more resources for investigating and prosecuting similar crimes. For every person who was horrified by what Jack had done, there were others who channeled their anger into action, determined to ensure that no animal would ever have to suffer the way his victims had. In the end, Jack's case became more than just a story of crime and punishment. It was a turning point, a moment when people came together to confront a reality that many would rather ignore. The fallout was as painful, the questions were difficult, but the lessons were undeniable. Justice had been served, but the fight to protect the vulnerable, both animals and humans, was far from over. The victims in this case were voiceless, unable to call for help, unable to explain the suffering they endured. The dogs Jack brought into his home were meant to be companions, creatures deserving of care and love. Instead, they became tools for exploitation, robbed of the safety and dignity every living being deserves. Each dog that crossed Jack's threshold carried with it a story, but those stories ended in the same way. The injuries, the fear, the confusion, they were the silent witnesses to acts that they could not understand. For these animals, trust was met with betrayal, and the harm inflicted on them left scars far deeper than the physical wounds. Animal abuse cases like this one highlight the inherent vulnerability of animals. They depend on humans for protection, for food, for shelter. They look to us as their guardians, and when that trust is broken, the damage is profound. The psychological impact on abused animals is not always visible, but it is real. Fearful behaviors, reluctance to interact with humans, and an inability to relax are just some of the signs seen in animals who have been mistreated. This case serves as a grim reminder of how vulnerable animals are and the importance of vigilance in protecting them. It is not enough to hope that someone else will notice or take action. Everyone has a responsibility to report signs of neglect or abuse when they see them. A simple phone call to the proper authorities can mean the difference between continued suffering and a second chance at life for an animal in need. Animal welfare organizations estimate that millions of cases of animal abuse go unreported each year. The scale of the issue is staggering, and yet the statistics only scratch the surface. Behind each number is a living being, each a victim of cruelty that could have been prevented. Studies show that many abusers often escalate their behavior over time, harming more animals or even crossing into other forms of violence. This connection underscores the importance of addressing animal abuse not just as a singular issue, but as part of a larger pattern that can affect entire communities. Dogs, like all animals, feel pain, experience fear, and seek comfort. They have no voice to advocate for themselves. That responsibility falls to us, and the attention brought to this case has already begun to inspire changes in the way that animal cruelty is handled, but much work remains to be done. Stronger laws, better enforcement, and widespread education are critical in ensuring that no animal has to endure what Jack's victims experienced. For those who want to make a difference, there are many ways to help. Supporting local shelters and rescue organizations is one of the most effective. These groups work tirelessly to provide care for animals who have been abused, abandoned, or neglected. Donations of money, supplies, or time can go a long way in helping these organizations continue their work. Another critical step is education, teaching others to recognize the signs of abuse and encouraging them to speak up when something doesn't seem right. Knowing what to look for can save lives. Animals in distress often show changes in behavior, unexplained injuries, or signs of neglect, like malnutrition or poor hygiene. By learning to recognize these signs, more people can become advocates for animals who cannot advocate for themselves. And for those who witness abuse, reporting it is essential. Many hesitate, fearing they might be wrong or that their concerns won't be taken seriously. But it is better to act on a suspicion and be proven wrong than to stay silent and allow harm to continue. Most areas have hotlines or organizations dedicated to handling animal cruelty cases, and anonymous reporting is often an option. This story is difficult to hear, but it has sparked a conversation that cannot be ignored. The outcry from this case is not just about anger or outrage, it's about change. It's about ensuring that the next dog, the next cat, the next animal doesn't have to endure the same fate. It's about creating a world where animals are treated with the compassion and respect they deserve. The dogs harmed in this case may never be able to tell their stories, but their suffering is not forgotten. It serves as a call to action, a reminder of the work that still needs to be done. For every animal saved, for every case reported, for every change in policy, we take one step closer to a society that values the lives of all creatures, great and small. Let this case be a turning point. Let it remind us that we have the power to make a difference. Support your local shelters, educate yourself and others, and never hesitate to report abuse. Together, we can ensure that animals like Jack's victims are no longer overlooked, no longer unheard, and no longer unprotected. This story has left us with many questions about trust, about responsibility, and about how we, as a society, respond to such acts. What do you think should be the punishment for someone like Jack? Someone who took advantage of the very creatures who relied on him for safety and care. We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever noticed something unusual about someone you know? Perhaps a neighbor, a friend, or even a stranger? Would you know what to do if you suspected that an animal was being mistreated? It can be difficult to take that first step, but reporting your concerns can save a life. Even a small observation, something that doesn't seem right, could be the beginning of an investigation that puts an end to suffering. If this story shocked you, consider sharing it with others. Awareness is one of the most powerful tools we have in the fight against cruelty. The more people who know about cases like this, the harder it becomes for such acts to go unnoticed. It's not just about punishment, it's about prevention. For those who want to take action, there are many ways to get involved. Support your local animal shelters, volunteer your time, or donate to organizations that work to protect animals and prosecute abusers. Advocacy doesn't always mean standing on the front lines. It can also mean spreading awareness, educating others, and making sure these stories are not forgotten. This case is not just a story about one man's actions, it's a reminder that animals depend on us in ways they cannot articulate. They trust us to do what's right, to protect them when they are vulnerable, and to speak up when they cannot. That responsibility doesn't belong to someone else. It belongs to all of us. Thank you for taking the time to hear this story, for listening to the voices that could not be heard, and for considering how we can all play a part in ensuring that no animal suffers in silence. If you found this story thought-provoking or eye-opening, please subscribe to this channel. We're committed to sharing stories that matter, stories that inspire change and demand attention. Don't forget to leave a comment below, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and join us next time as we uncover another story that challenges us to be better, to do more, and to never look away. Together, we can make a difference.